to start the sermon, and I'd appreciate if someone could just confirm I'm audible over the screen by dropping a note into the chat box. Okay, Theron Sarnai. We have worked on a fix for the audio issue. I think I should be audible to you now. Please can you drop a message onto the chat box to confirm. Okay. Thank you. In which case, let's begin. So, as usual, we're now about to commence a sermon, and we're all prepared to make use of this opportunity to listen to, understand, and comprehend the Buddha's teaching. But before we do so, let us all take a moment to remind ourselves of how extremely fortunate we are to be disciples of the Buddha, to be his students, his lifelong students, to take his refuge, to have him guide us, to have the teaching guide us, and to have the Mahasangha guide us towards our liberation. He is the infinitely virtuous one, the omniscient one, the magnificent one, the immaculate one, the one who is worthy of all praise and glory and fame. So before we commence this sermon, let us all take a moment then to pledge our allegiance to the Lord Buddha by reciting the Dhirasa Vikada Mohasa stanza, followed by which we will take refuge in the Noble Triple Gem, observe the precepts, and commence today's sermon. Dhirasa Vigata Mohasa Pabhinna Khilasa Vijita Vijayasa Anighasa Susamachitasa Buddha Silasa Sadhupanyasa Vesantarasa Vimalasa Bhagavato Tassa Savakohamasmi Dhirasa Vigata Mohasa Pabhinna Khilasa Vijita Vijayasa Anighasa Susamachitasa Buddha Silasa Sadhupanyasa Vesantarasa Vimalasa Bhagavato Tassa Savakohamasmi Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Please be upstanding if you have not as yet, and please recite all together and after me. Buddhaṃ saranam gacchāmi, Dhammaṃ saranam gacchāmi, Sangham saranam gacchāmi, Dutiyampi Buddhaṃ saranam gacchāmi, Dutiyampi Dhammaṃ saranam gacchāmi, Dutiyampi Sangham saranam gacchāmi, Tatiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami. Tatiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami. Tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami. Saranaгаmanang sampunnang. Panatipata veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Adinnadana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Kamesu miccācara veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Musavada veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Surameraya majjapama datthana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Tisaranena saddhing panchasilang dhammang sadhukang surakitang katva appamadena sampadeta. Okay, you may now be seated. And before we commence the sermon, as we always do, let us consider this opportunity to listen to the teaching of the Buddha a privilege. And let us make use of this opportunity to offer and extend this privilege to those who we have come together with in samsara, infinite numbers of beings who will have come into our lives and gone out of our lives throughout this long journey, who will have made changes in our lives. This is our opportunity to repay the debts that we owe them. Those beings who will have on countless occasions been mothers and fathers to us, brothers and sisters to us, husbands or wives, uncles, aunts, nephews, nieces, grandparents, teachers, well-wishers, and anyone who might have helped, supported and assisted us in any way that they could, whatever their capacity. We have a duty towards them, an obligation, and that is to help them in a time when they need our help just as much as they helped us when we needed theirs. So let us extend the gift of Dhamma, the gift which excels all gifts, out to them. May they witness this meritorious deed. May they rejoice in the merits that we are about to acquire. And in rejoicing these merits, may they be able to be born in the blissful plane, if any of them are today in the woeful plane. And for those beings in the blissful plane, may they listen to the teaching of the Buddha, understand it, comprehend it, and attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. And therefore to avail them of this opportunity, as I now make this invitation now to all of them, to all those beings in the 10,000 world systems, I ask you all to extend that invitation in your hearts and in your minds, with compassionate thoughts extended towards them. Invite them to join us, invite them to witness this meritorious deed, to listen to the teaching of the Buddha, to better themselves, and to attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Samanta cakkavalesu atra gacchantu devata saddhammang munirajassa sunantu sagga mokkadang dhamma savana kalo ayang bhadanta dhamma savana kalo ayang bhadanta dhamma savana kalo ayang bhadanta. And also, before we commence today's sermon, let us all take a moment to acknowledge and accept that although our lives have changed in ways and means which were beyond our imagination, thanks to the Dhamma. Before we were in receipt of the Dhamma, and before we were fortunate enough to be in the association of noble people, our associations were virtually always with ignoble, immoral people. These associations defiled our minds with raga, desha and moha, desire, aversion and delusion, and having been blinded with ignorance and attachment, countless times we will have offended, insulted, desecrated and reviled the noble ones, as well as the noble triple gem. For any thoughts, words or actions of desecration, slander or insult that we might have directed towards them, either knowingly or unknowingly, the consequences of such actions may be that today, as we make efforts to achieve our salvation, these efforts are hindered, and it becomes extremely difficult for us to understand the teaching of the Buddha, and therefore to achieve our liberation. So before we commence this sermon then, as today we are hoping to understand his teaching and to help us achieve our salvation, let us take a moment to seek the forgiveness of the noble ones, and therefore, for any thoughts, words or actions of revile, desecration and slander or insult that I might have directed towards the Samma Sambuddhas, Pacceka Buddhas, Arahata Buddhas, Anagami, Sakrudagami, Sotapannas, be they on the path or having attained the fruits, as well as the Sambuddha Shasana, may the noble ones find the compassion within themselves to forgive me, such that I am henceforth able to understand the teaching of the Buddha and achieve my salvation. And while you do that, also make a firm resolve never to conduct yourself in similar ways in future. And let us also make a final resolve to ourselves, a determination that may through the course of this sermon, may we be able to, or may I be able to achieve the noble state of Sotapanna and close the gates to the four hells once and for all, redeem myself from the hells and embark on the journey towards my salvation. If there are those among you who have already achieved the noble state of Sotapanna, then may through the course of this sermon you be able to fulfill the subsequent stages and attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. With that resolve in mind, I invite you all to prepare yourselves to listen to this sermon. Okay. So last week, we traced our way back to the foundations of the principles of Buddhist teaching. As I reminded you, it's important that from time to time we check with ourselves that we have a firm grounding in the principles, that we understand the basics upon which everything else stands, and really everything else is simply an extension of the basics of Buddhist philosophy. So it would not make sense for one to say, I don't really understand anicca, dukkha, anatta, but I really get the concepts of paticcasamuppada. That does not make sense, because one who does not understand anicca, dukkha and anatta does not understand the dependent origination. They may understand it in terms of the steps but that is knowledge rather than comprehension. So one who has truly understood the teaching is one whose comprehension is solid on the basics of Buddhist philosophy, the crux of it, which is anicca, dukkha and anatta, which are the three intrinsic characteristics of all conditioned things. There is only one entity which does not demonstrate or possess these characteristics, but that in again is not an entity in itself. It is not a conditioned thing, therefore it's not an entity, and that is Nibbana and Nibbana alone. So anything else this side of Nibbana, or rather the other side of Nibbana, whichever way you want to look at it, if Nibbana is the border that you see, or the fence that you see far afar, and that's the line you want to cross, then everything this side of Nibbana is conditioned. From mind and matter, and if there is ever any such thing as anything in between, all thoughts, mental factors, the things we've been talking about, Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankara, Vijnana, the aggregates, be they the clinging aggregates or the non-clinging aggregates, whatever the case might be, if it is worldly, then all such things are conditioned. And the nature of all conditioned things are that they're vexatious, sufferable, and essenceless. So we took a few steps back on our journey, went back to the basics last week to remind ourselves that liking, you remember we talked about several examples, practical examples surrounding our lives, and how liking is really a useless attribute to have within our minds, that it does not bring us any advantages. So hopefully I'm just juggling your memory here, and you are reminded of these things that we spoke about last week. How liking is a useless attribute to possess, because it does not bring any advantages. But that's not the worst of it. The worst of it is, despite the fact that it has no advantages, it has plenty of disadvantages. So not only is it not a good thing, it's a terrible thing. So it's not harmless, it's harmful. So liking is another word for attachment that we know. So this is what we talked about last week. And if I remember rightly, towards the end of the sermon, I assigned you a task, and that is to walk around your home and see if you can find bits of your freedom that you lost inside your four walls. With every object that you encounter, every person you encounter, or animals, pets for that matter perhaps, these are all places where you would have lost your freedom. And the most ironical thing about this is that we human beings, without an understanding of the Dhamma, have this view, which is essentially what wrong view is, have this view that freedom is the ability to get whatever it is we want. So that is why when we celebrate freedom, we say we are free to do whatever we like. That statement or definition of freedom is flawed. From a worldly perspective, what I just said there makes absolutely no sense. So if you're thinking, that doesn't make sense, Swaminathan, so that's because you're not seeing it from the angle that I'm talking to you about. Freedom is not the ability to get whatever it is you want. Freedom is not wanting anything. That is what freedom is. The ability to get whatever you want, people believe is freedom, and then they fight for their freedom. If someone's free, why would they fight? A free man does not fight. A free man has given up all fights. Because a free man is a victorious man. He has given up all fights. One who is fighting cannot be someone who's free, surely. So we keep our freedom and we fight for our freedom. People say we fight for our rights. People say, I'm free to say whatever I like. Little does he realize that he's talking about the fact that he is not free. People say, I have the right, I have the freedom to be wherever I want to be, to follow whatever religion I want to follow, to get married to whoever I want to get married to live wherever I want to live, to go wherever I want to go, to eat whatever I want to eat. I have a freedom. This is my freedom, my right. People even make demands and they claim to be free. But little do they realize that all the things that they say, just shout out loud in silent words, here are some of the things that took away my freedom. Because in the expression of their freedom, they have become slaves. I am free to go wherever I like. The wise among you will realize that that sentence in itself is flawed. You can't be free if there is anywhere you like to be. You can't be free if there are things you like to eat. You can't be free if there is somewhere you like to be, or if there is something you want to do. You can't be free. That is not freedom. That is freedom, perhaps in a worldly sense, but it's not ultimate freedom. It's not the freedom that Buddhist philosophy helps us to achieve. So, hopefully you managed to do that last week. And as I say, always I remind you about this, listening to the sermons is a very small portion or part of your progress in the Dhamma. The things that we ask you to do over the course of the week, if they don't happen, in other words, if you don't do them, then your progress will be quite slow. I do see this from time to time. Sometimes when I talk to people and when their complaint is that they're not making progress in the path, they're not making the progress that they wish to make, or they're not where they like to be. If you take the moment, if you take the time to study why it is that they find themselves in that position, 9 times out of 10, I feel like saying 10 times out of 10, but I will keep 1 out of 10 just so you can all fit in that one. It's for everyone else, the 9 out of 10. So everyone that's not you, essentially. The 9 out of 10, they don't do what we ask them to do. They'll sit down, they'll listen to everything, but they won't do what they're asked to do. The reflection part, they forget. Can't be bothered. Don't have the time. Don't feel like it. Sleepy. Hungry. Thirsty. Lousy. Excuses. And you remember from Guru Swami Nuhanse's sermons, you can give any number of excuses. We'll accept them. But in the face of Mara, those excuses are unacceptable. So, getting into the habit of giving excuses is not going to be a good thing in the long run. In the short term, it will buy you goodwill and good and kind gestures, but in the long run it will be to your detriment. But after all, it's every man for himself, and everyone is free to choose what they like to do. Again, in that statement you see that that is a flawed statement. Every man is free to do what he likes to do. A man who likes to do something is not a free man. But hopefully, as I say, during the course of last week, you engaged in the activity that I asked you to do. That was the homework. I didn't mean literally take a bag, walk around the house, you know that, but metaphorically, right? If you at least walked up to your fridge and stood in front of the fridge and thought to myself, I lost my freedom in front of this. Or you walked up to your TV, or as you sat down to watch TV, if you picking up your remote, at least if the thought crossed your mind once or twice over the past week, you know, in those moments, those are the moments during which you make progress towards your liberation. So the more moments like that you have, the faster you make progress towards your liberation. Yes, listen to the sermons are useful, but this is the listening, the doing part is essential. It's not a optional, it's an essential. So those who did the homework will have had some time to reflect on what happened to them and how, in building a life, in building a world, in building our homes and our families around us, to enjoy the freedom that we thought we were affording ourselves, it was actually counterintuitive. We were doing the reverse of what we thought we were doing. We were doing the opposite to ourselves of what we thought we were doing. And that's the greatest irony there is. And this is all because of a misunderstanding, not seeing the truth, not realizing the truth, and to expect happiness to come to us from worldly and material existence. So today I'm going to take another step forward from where we left off last week, because again, as I say, I think it's useful to remind ourselves of the basics, and last week was taking a few steps back, but today, from where we stopped last week, we will take another step forward, because after all, I want to talk to you about things which make sense to me, and the things that I'm practicing and I'm reflecting on as I spend the time in the monastery. But of course I want to make sure that what I'm saying is not falling on deaf ears. In other words, what I'm saying is making sense to those who are listening to this sermon. Because there's no point in me just speaking a lot of stuff, saying a lot of things, doing a long sermon, if at the end of that none of you understood any of it. There's no point in doing that, because this is not an exercise or an activity to show you how much I know. Because if that was what this is, to show you how much I know, then we would have had to stop with the first sermon. That's all I do know. So this is not an activity for that. This whole process, all these sermons regularly, once a week, all of this is to guide you along the path to your liberation. The journey that we are on, we want to help you walk that. So this is why from time to time it's always important to go back and make sure that if there were any strugglers, any who fell off along the way, we can pick them back up and then take them with us, because this is all for the greater good. And for those who are quite familiar with these concepts, then nothing gone to waste. It's always good to go back and revisit these concepts and make sure that your understanding is solid. And as I say, I promised you this, the more you understand in the Dhamma, the more you comprehend it, the more you go back to the basics and revisit the basics, the more they will begin to make sense to you. Don't forget that when the Buddha was asked what is the simplest, the easiest, the most straightforward way to fulfill one's journey, having embarked on it, on each occasion he says, reflect on anicca dukkha anatta. So this is what we need to be talking about. Anicca makes more sense to a Sakrudagami than it makes to a Sotapanna. It makes more sense to an Anagami than it does to a Sakrudagami. And it makes more sense to an Arahant than it does to an Anagami person. It's the same thing, but it makes more sense. The depth of it. Remember we talked about being a tea person. It's the depth which increases as we make every step forward on our journey. So let's go back and revisit the concepts we talked about and make sure that we have not forgotten and our practice continues to be around these concepts. I will share my screen with you in just a moment. Okay. So you remember last week we talked about the problem of liking. We agreed that this is a non-essential. I think even the word non-essential is an overstatement. It's an unnecessary attribute to have in our minds. There is no need for liking because liking does not serve any purpose other than suffering. Liking something does not make it any better. Liking something does not make it any more versatile. Liking something does not make it any more effective or any more productive. Liking anything did no good to anybody ever, be that in the past, present or in the future. So this is the curse that we have brought upon us. Liking. Okay, so it's a curse word. Now let's remind ourselves then, where does this fit in the whole picture? How does one small word bring us so much agony and grief? How does liking lead to suffering? Let us remind ourselves of this. When you like something, you end up wanting it. How do we know this? Well, the simple test is there anything you want that you don't like? Can you name anything, any one thing that you want but you don't like? No, clearly not, right? So, and can you also then name anything that you like but you don't want? Or given the opportunity, you wouldn't want it? You wouldn't want to acquire it, but you like it? Clearly not. So, these two things go hand in hand. So if there's something you like, then you want it and there's no choice about that. You like what you want, and you want what you like. So what's the big deal? What's the problem with wanting things? Isn't that what we've always been like? We've always wanted things. What's the problem with wanting things? But the problem with wanting things is because it does not fit with why we liked it in the first place. Here's the problem. The reason we liked something was because of our belief that the things we like are surely things that should bring us happiness. The things we like them because we believe that they're the things that should end up with me looking like this. That's why when a child's crying, what do you give it? You give it something it likes. Why? Because you believe that this can transform to this when you give it something it likes. This is what we've always been used to thinking. You can turn a frown to a smile by giving them something they like. So therefore, we have always accustomed, or we have always gotten used to, we've gotten used to associating a smiley face with a like. Where else have we seen like? Does that ring a bell? That's the best I can draw that. Yes, it's the Facebook like. Right? So that little picture, I mean, that's, everyone knows it. Even my grandmother does, funnily enough, but she doesn't have Facebook. But we have always associated liking to be a very positive thing. We always associated liking to be a positive thing. We always think of like as a positive thing because it's what makes us happy, the things that we like. But as we see, the moment you like something, you can't not want it. Whatever you like, you want. So what's the problem again? The problem is, it does not fit with why we liked something in the first place. I mean, that's the problem with it. There's no other problem, so to speak. What's the problem with drinking salt water if you're thirsty? The same problem goes for liking something if you want to be happy. It's the same problem, the same concepts. What's the problem with drinking salty water if you're thirsty? Well, the more you drink it, the thirstier you're going to get, and it's not going to help you quench your thirst one bit. That's the problem. It's not that salt water is a bad thing. Salt water is used for a lot of things. But for the purpose of quenching one's thirst, now for that, salt water is no good. It's not just it's no good, it's the worst thing you can do to yourself. See, the same concept goes for wanting. What's the problem with wanting? Nothing other than you're left not where you wanted to be. That's the problem. You wanted to be happy, and therefore you liked something, and now you're left wanting. When you're left wanting, you're left in suffering. That's the problem with wanting. If wanting didn't cause, let me put it this way. What if you wanted to, say you were happy and you wanted to be unhappy? Okay, so you were happy, but you wanted to be unhappy. And therefore you liked something. Do you see anything wrong with this? There's absolutely nothing wrong with this. Why? Because if you want to be unhappy, then liking is the best thing that you could do. Because the moment you like something, you're going to shift to wanting it, and then immediately afterwards, you're going to now start to experience the effects of wanting. You need to understand that wanting is not something that you experience through sensations. It's not a feeling. It's something that has to be understood and realized. But the effects of wanting are experiences. That is how we experience suffering. All this we've talked about in the past, but this is a reminder, just to make sure we're all We're all practicing, and we're all the basics of the Buddhist philosophy, of the doctrine, are firmly cemented in our minds. So, as I say, if you wanted to go from being happy to unhappy, liking and then wanting something, there's nothing wrong with that. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. However, if you are unhappy and you want to be happy, and now you like something, then you want something, now that's poison. That's the last thing you ought to be doing. The worst thing you could do to yourself. So, why are we talking about this? We're talking about this because everyone in the world wants to do this, not this. Everyone in the world wants to be happy, not unhappy. Unfortunately, the path that they're taking to be happy is the wrong path. This is why we're talking to you, we're talking to them, and we're trying to show them the errors in their way. So what happens when you want something? There are two states you could be in. When you want something, let's take something material, anything, doesn't matter what it is. Whatever you want, you either have it, it can only be in two states. You either have it or you don't have it. What if I've ordered it and it's on the way, delivery? Yeah, you still don't have it. You'll have it when you have it. Until then, you don't have it. Okay, so you're in one of these two states. So that's a 1 and here's a 0. Now, so what's the problem? The problem is your belief was that this would change to a this when you have it, when you have what you want. Therefore, you liked it. But we know now that having something does not mean that you no longer have any suffering. You no longer have the suffering of not having it, agreed, but now you have the suffering that comes with having it. And what did we call that? That is what we call fear. How so? Can you name one thing that you want and you like and you have that you're not fearful about? Fearful of what? Fearful that you might lose it? Fearful that it might be destroyed? Might be taken away from you? Confiscated? Might be infected? Might be destroyed? Might burn down in flames? All these things that could happen. Always fearful. So, fear is never something you like to be in. When people can't get to grips with their fear, they take treatment for that. Phobias, as they're called. But that fear, so clearly, fear is not something that we like to be in. It's not a state of mind which we like to be in, fear. That fear was not with us until we went from not having to having, whatever the case was. So when we shifted from not having something to having it, that's when fear entered our minds. So fear was not with us until we achieved or until we acquired what we wanted. Okay, so let's not get what we want then. So surely that should fix the problem. Really? Now you don't have it. How does that make you feel? When you want something and you don't have it. Now that is what we call grief or sorrow. Again, not something that we enjoy, not a state of mind that we like to be in. So you see, when you want something, you immediately fall into one of these two states. You either fall to a 0, which is the don't having it, or through action, you move from that to 1, which is a having it, and along with that comes fear. So is there a way you can not be fearful and not be in sorrow? no obvious option seems to be available if you have already come all this way to wanting. And then the duration that is spent acquiring or going from not having to having, this requires effort or activity, and that activity is laborious. That requires labor. And again, labor is not something that we enjoy. This is effort that has to be extended, not something we like to do. In any other circumstance, you wouldn't do it. You wouldn't do it. When was the last time you remember washing next door neighbor's dog? No, you don't do that. You'll wash your dog because that's your dog and you want it to be clean. You don't want to pick up any lice or any other diseases, and you want it to be clean because you want your kids to be able to play with it, right? So you see, all of this effort you are going to have to expend to go from not having what you want to having what you want. From not having to having. This is that jump. This is the bridge that helps you cross from a 0 to a 1. So it's when we are unhappy with the feeling of grief or the feeling of sorrow, we have to expend effort and labor and energy to shift from that to fear. And I mean, does that really not seem counterproductive? We are expending effort or energy to move from grief to fear. If you just ignore everything on the left hand side of this line, just ignore all of this for a moment. Now what do you see happening in this space? If you just ignored all of this and you just took this part of the picture to show someone, let's imagine you want to go and talk to your friends. And they ask you, what have you been doing this week? You don't talk about any of this stuff. And you just show them you write it on a piece of paper and you just show this part. You know what, I was in grief, so I spent some energy to go to fear. They'd be scratching their heads wondering what's gone wrong with you. That is the truth, is it not? If you just take out all of the rest of this and just focus on what's really going on in this space, because these are all the things that we experience. This is all real stuff. Not that this is not real, but this is very real to us because we can experience the pain, the turmoil and the agony that comes with this. Jumping from grief to fear, that's what effort does. That's what expenditure of energy allows you to do. Go from one state of unhappiness to another state of unhappiness. Where's the happiness then? So again, we have to then ask ourselves, well then, what did wanting help us achieve after all? But then how come people seem to be happy? If you just go on YouTube and type in names of maybe famous people or people who are quite they have achieved things in their lives, high achievers, and usually you'll find either documentaries or personal accounts of how they have managed to do what they want, and today they're happy. Today they're enjoying their lives. So what they're talking about there is, I didn't have this. There was a time in my life when I didn't have this, whatever that this is. So here's the variable. There was a time in my life where I didn't have this. This is what I'll say. You just go on any kind of inspirational video, just type it on YouTube, or highly successful people and how they started out small and they grew and then they have become the business magnates and entrepreneurs of today and highly successful people. They'll all have a story to tell. And if you listen to their stories carefully, what they'll say is, there was a time in my life when I didn't have what I wanted. And then what did I do? When everyone said I couldn't, when everyone said, oh no, you're not going to do it, oh no, you can't do it, there's no way you're going to do it, I proved to them that I can. I proved to them that I can achieve something, that I can make a man out of myself. So what I did was I spent day and night. I worked hard. I woke up in the early hours of the day, and I ran, and I climbed, and I jumped, and I swam, and I flew, and I got the flu. All of that to move from, oh, I didn't have it, so now I can say I have it. But if you just cover all this up, what's really going on in their mind? They were in a state of grief, and then there was all the expenditure of effort, labor and energy, and then they moved to fear. This is what they're celebrating. They're celebrating fear. The celebration of fear. That is what everyone around the world does. The celebration of fear. Every year, at the AGMs of all the big companies, when they come out with their results at the end of at the end of the year, and they say, this is how much money we have made this year, this is how much profit we have made this year. And what are they celebrating? They're celebrating fear. It seems ironical, does it not? It seems like madness, does it not? Because what they have done now is they have accumulated and acquired materialistic things which henceforth they'll have to safeguard, they'll have to protect, keep safe from prying eyes, and there'll be others who want them. Can you name one thing that you have and you like that there's not the slightest chance that someone else in the world also likes? There's no such thing. Even if it was just a bar of chocolate, you keep it on the kitchen counter. You leave it for an hour and come back and you'll see the ants carrying it away. It might not be that someone's broken into your house, but there's always going to be someone. That could be a human being, it could be an animal, it could be anything else. They'll also want it. Because wherever there's liking, wherever there's wanting, there's always a competition. So whenever you achieve something, there's always going to be a competition. A competition. And in a competition, you have winners and you have losers. You have to go into a competition ready to lose. Right? You have to go into a competition ready to lose. And people will talk about the fact that they're ready to lose as a mark of courage. I'm ready to face any challenge because I'm ready to lose. I'm mature enough and I can handle loss and losing. People will talk about that. But actually what they're talking about is their immaturity. They don't realize that they're having to succumb to this failure in life because they are going into a competition in the first place. The truth of the matter is, whenever there's a competition, you don't really have winners and losers, you only have losers. Both parties lose. You either lose because you have lost what you wanted, or you lose because now you have what you want, and now you have to keep it safe from the other party. So why go into a competition in the first place? Where are the winners? Where are the losers? Where are winners and losers? There are only losers. So when you have the World Cup, whatever sport that is, right? You have the selection games, then you go have the quarterfinals, then you have the semi-finals, and then you have the finals, and then you have, there's after all that, and then the whole world celebrates the winning or the victory of one team or one person, and then they give him or her or the team a cup to celebrate victory. What are they really celebrating? They're celebrating their failure. They're celebrating having lost, because now they have just moved from grief to fear. Remember the old adage, if you are top in anything, there's only one way you can go. If you are the first in anything, there's only one way you can go, and that is down. So anyone who's first, anyone who's top, anyone who's prime, anyone who's at the top of any organization, the top of the class, now from that day forward, if that is something you want to be, if you want to be top of the batch, if you want to be top of the class, if you want to be top of the company, if you want to be the best salesman, if you want to be the best in your profession, if you want to be the best actor or the best singer, the best musician, the best magician, does not matter. If you want to be the best, the moment you become best, now from that day forward, you have lost your freedom. Because from that day forward, you have to maintain what you have worked so hard to acquire. No one talks about that. You know, these athletes who train very hard and they achieve number one spot in their sport. When they get up on the podium and they collect their gold medal, in the back of their minds, they're thinking, oh gosh, I'm now first. All the effort that I have to now make or take to make sure I keep myself first. That's a lot of work. That's a lot of pain. That's a lot of fear that creeps into their mind. They didn't have that problem until they became first. Or second or third, makes no difference. Because whatever position you are in, whatever position you want to hold, fear always is part of that. So you see, in this worldly existence, there are no winners, there are only losers. In any competition, there's no winner and a loser. There are just losers. You have either lost because you haven't got what you wanted, or you have lost because you have got what you wanted. And now you have to protect it, you have to safeguard it, you have to maintain it, and all the other stuff and activity that comes along with it. So where's the fun in a competition? I mean, seriously, how can you watch a game of sport or any other competition match and clap when at the end of that game someone's being awarded best prize, the top prize? Are you not applauding their fear? Are you not applauding the fact that they have lost? Are you not applauding the fact that they have surrendered and succumbed, or they have surrendered their freedom? When in reality, what you really should be doing is feeling sorry for them. This day forward, you're going to have to suffer. You have suffered all along, and then suffering has not stopped. From this day forward, you have to suffer. Some people, when they go through a great deal of pain and effort to sometimes perhaps propose to their loved ones, and then they celebrate getting on the porua, getting married to the love of their life, as if they are being crowned king. Little do they realize that from this day forward, what they have done is they have taken over. They have taken over the guardianship of the prized possession which was once of the person's parents, and now henceforth you become the guardian. So along with that, fear comes into your mind. Just think about it. A man stepping onto the porua does not step off that porua the same way that he did when he got onto it. Person with light shoulders gets off the porua with heavy shoulders. Now fear is his best friend. All day, every day, from that day forward, fear. I'm giving you time to think about this, because you will have experiences in your lives, how these things happened and how your life evolved through these experiences, how your life changed, and all the things that we thought was going to bring us pleasure and happiness and joy were ultimately the very things that took away those things from us. What happened to us? What we did unto ourselves? When you worked hard to get yourself that job, remember going into your work or to the interview, walking into the interview room, sitting down for the interview, going through that, and at the end of the interview they tell you, we will inform you in a few days' time. And then you keep checking your inbox, you keep checking your mails, you try giving them calls, and ultimately you get a response. I remember, because I had this day in my life. I remember that day when, after university, I had applied for graduate programs, and the day when I got accepted, to this day I remember how, as I got the results and through an email, or actually there was a phone call, and the moment I hung up, I went running to my parents with tears in my eyes. And I was so happy. I was so delighted that I had got myself a job. I thought I was victorious. A fine job it was, a job in a bank. Everyone wanted to get in there. Then I got the job, and I felt overjoyed. And only I know the things that happened from that day forward. But they don't tell you about all that stuff. But all of you in your own lives will have similar experiences. And do you remember walking into the office, sitting down with your seniors, and walking into meetings and trying to prove that you're as good as they think you are? We all have such experiences in our lives, always wanting to prove ourselves to others. Why? Because they have the power to take away what you want. You call that freedom? I call that slavery. And then when there were meetings with your senior bosses, managers, sometimes, when it was some meetings, they got heated discussions and conversations, tight budgets, tight deadlines, tight projects, and then everyone wants something. Everyone around the table wants something. And when everyone wants different things, now everyone's pulling in their own direction. See, you didn't see all of this happen. This was all the to be. We didn't see any of this. And then slowly life exposed its ugly face to ourselves. That grim face to us. Slowly but surely it exposed itself. Being in those meetings, taking down notes, and then sometimes having to answer when put on the spot. When asked, why haven't you done this? I asked you to do this, why haven't you done this? And then you start to speak, and then it feels like your voice box is locked. You can't get the words out. And you end up with sweaty palms, butterflies in your stomach, and your heart pounding away. What do you call this? Happiness? You call this an achievement? You call this joy? Is it any wonder then people at the end of the week, They look for the first opportunity to go into a pub to get a drink and get everything off their chest and talk to their colleagues and share with them what happened through the week and how they got a good, I can't say the word out loud, from their bosses. And all the stress. But you can't just say no when asked to do something, because you fear the repercussions. What might happen? What if I say no and the person I'm talking to doesn't like my answer? Then what might happen? Particularly during the probation period. Do you remember that time? Your probation period? You know, that's that period when you're willing to bend over backwards, do anything and everything. Do you call that happiness and freedom? Oh, but I remember those days, when there was we all have a probation period, and I remember talking to my friends who had not managed to get, because we quite a few of us applied, and to those who were not able to get the job, I remember I didn't tell them about all the hardship I was going through in the bank. I only talked to them about the things that I got as a result of it. We've all been there, haven't we? How we fooled ourselves. Because we just didn't have any freedom to think about what we're doing to ourselves. We didn't have any freedom to think. Because one thing after the other, there were always things that we liked and things that we wanted and things therefore we had to go and get, or things that we had already gotten and therefore had to engage in all the activities that we had to keep them safe and safeguarded. And then after that came everything else. Now you could afford a house. You could afford getting a mortgage. Then you could afford getting married. Then you could afford having kids. Then you could afford having a car, and then another car, and then another house, and then one after the other. When we thought we were buying ourselves our freedom, really what we were doing was we were giving up our freedom in exchange for fear. Giving up freedom in exchange for fear. That's what we were doing. How do we celebrate this? That's what I'm struggling to understand. People celebrate their anniversary, right? Their work anniversary, their wedding anniversary, their birth anniversary, and various other anniversaries. And then they've even come up with names for things like that, like silver anniversary, golden anniversary, diamond and platinum anniversaries. I'm giving you time to think. How much we have glorified suffering. So much so we can't even see suffering now for what it is. We can't see it for what it is. We have glorified suffering. Do you not remember writing essays as a young child in school? I remember this, how I learned to talk about advancements in science and technology. And I used to start my speeches or my essays talking about how our ancestors, they were uncivilized, and they didn't have all the luxuries of today. They didn't have access to science and technology like we do today, and how we live in a very advanced livelihood, and how they lived a very primitive life and didn't get to enjoy half the things that we enjoy today, because they didn't have access to all the resources and all the technology and the money and everything else, the material things we have today. Do you remember writing essays like that? I remember writing essays like that, because that's what I was taught. I remember when usually we did this once a month. When our family, we once a month, particularly around Poya Day, we would go and visit our grandparents. And on the way to our grandparents, who lived in, so my paternal grandparents, they live, or used to, passed away recently, but they used to live in a rural area, in a village area, and driving up there, I used to look at the little huts that people had built for themselves. They were nothing like the cement and mortar and brick houses that we used to have in the cities. They didn't have the roofs that we had. They were thatched roofs. There were small houses, and they didn't have a water supply, a mains water supply. It was all from the well. And some of the houses we drove past, they didn't have electricity, but instead they had a lantern which they'd use to give them some light during the night. And they couldn't go to the supermarkets like we used to and buy all the delicious and lovely things that we wanted to eat. They didn't know that sausages had been invented. There was no Pizza Hut. There was no KFC anywhere near that place. And so I used to wonder, scratching my head, how can these people even live? I remember one day taking my computer to, I had a laptop which I took with me, and then I think I went and asked somebody. So this was the house adjoining, next door to my grandmother's. Took my laptop there for something or the other, I can't remember exactly what, and I asked them, where can I plug this? Because I wanted to get it charged. And they didn't have an electric outlet. So I was wondering, how can you even live like this? Where do you plug your laptops? I asked them. So I thought, what a sad way to live. How much they must be suffering, these village folk. Unlike us, who are very advanced and civilized and have access to all these things. That's what I thought. Of the latest and the greatest of everything, all the gadgets and all the colors and the televisions, and they didn't have any of those things. And I thought to myself, how can anyone live like this? And I was asking myself, have they not gained freedom yet? Is this part of the country still colonized by the British? Perhaps they haven't gained their freedom yet. Is that why they can't do what they want to do? But little did I realize, actually, they didn't want to do the things I wanted to do. So they were free. I was the one who was not free. That's what I'm saying, how readily we have glorified our suffering. Seriously, think about it. How readily we have glorified our suffering. And how readily we are willing to allow others to indoctrinate us along the same lines. I mean, just think about it. I mean, what a small population of people, let alone in the world, in this country, okay, will probably get to listen to these sermons and be able to start to think in a different way to how they've always thought about life. People will come into this world innocent. They'll not know what they need to do to be happy, but they'll always want to be happy. And then they'll fall into bad company. Bad company, Asatpurusha, who will tell them these are the things you need to do to be happy. Go get what you want. The problem with you is you don't have what you want, so go get it. And then that'll be the answer. And then they'll show you videos. They'll ask you to come along with them to seminars and to talks by people who claim to have become successful. They'll get you to listen to TED Talks. They'll get you to listen to all these wonderful, fantastic, inspirational speakers. How to become successful, how to become rich, how to become wealthy, how to become prosperous. Isn't that what we wish everyone at the end of the start of the new year? Wish you a happy and prosperous new year. Really, just think about what do you mean by that when you say that? I wish you have more of what you want. Isn't that what we mean by I wish you a prosperous new year? May you prosper in this new year. May you prosper. May you have more than what you have today. May you have more of what you want. In other words, may you, by the end of the next year, have more fear than you do today. Because you don't seem to be suffering enough. You seem to be walking around just cursing people. That's what we're doing. That's what we seem to be doing. Think, I'm giving you time to think. Think about what we're doing up to ourselves. Think about what we're doing to our children. Think about the things we're doing to the people we love, the people we know. And all the while, sometimes we do things which from a worldly perspective seem so genuine, so brave and courageous, but really, when you analyze it, it's quite pitiful. Some of the things that people do, and things that we get to hear from others, from other people. I was recently informed about, someone informed me about this. Happened a while ago. I only got to know about it recently. There was a gentleman who'd come to the monastery to meet one of our monks, and I'll relate to you the story as I heard it, and this monk came to me asking, Swaminathan, what advice should I give this man? I'll relate to you the story first and see how you analyze the situation, okay? And then I'll tell you my take on it. So this gentleman had come to visit this monk, one of our monks, and during this conversation he had related to our monk. By our monk I don't mean Ape Hamru, I just mean one of our monks, this story from his life. And here's what had happened. He had had a fiancée who he was obviously had planned to get married to. They'd been dating for quite a while, several years, 2 or 3 years, and they were now getting ready to get married. So everything had been planned. So the wedding was the following day, and so hotels booked, all of the friends and family informed, and all the work and effort that needs to go into planning a wedding, right? All of that done, clearly, because the wedding is the following day, right? So all the bookings made, everything planned and everything done. Okay, so it's just the wedding that remains. This man had associated another girl, so not the lady that he wanted to get married to, but another girl, in a very friendly and very brotherly, sisterly way. So they had affection, but not sort of love that one would have towards a partner, but it was an affectionate relationship, like a brotherly, sisterly relationship, a filial relationship, if you like. And this relationship that they shared had been one that had gone on for about 10 years. So it's a very long relationship. And the day before the wedding, okay, so imagine the wedding, this the following day, the day before the wedding, the girl that this man has this very brotherly affection towards, so they share that relationship. The girl comes to the man and she says to him, do you really want to get married tomorrow? So it's like on the spot asking, do you want to get married tomorrow? Like she didn't know that the wedding was going to take place the following day. She comes and asks this man, do you really want to get married tomorrow? Okay, so this is the friend of the man who's going to get married the following day. So she's asking him, do you really want to get married tomorrow? And obviously the man didn't understand how to take this question. He just said, what do you mean, do you want to get married tomorrow? Clearly everything's planned, and both of us, we are deeply in love, and we want to get married tomorrow. And then at this point this girl drops a bombshell. She says, I would rather you didn't marry her, because although you feel brotherly love towards me, the love that I feel for you goes beyond that. I didn't know how to share this with you, but it's always been inside my heart, and I always wanted to tell this to you, but I really just couldn't muster the courage to tell it to you. And she says, I know that things can't change now because it's all too late, but I wanted to let you know how I feel about you, because I think you need to know that I care so deeply about you, and the affection that I feel for you, it can't die with me. You need to know how I feel about you, and I just thought I should let you know. The man got married the following day, 3 years after the wedding. This man comes to meet our monk at the monastery, and he says, Sir, ever since that girl, my friend, came and expressed her love for me, from that day forward, I didn't feel the same way about the wife that I got married to. I couldn't love her. I didn't feel a genuine affection towards her. I couldn't. I was just with her, but I was not with her mentally. Whenever I was with her, I was thinking about my friend, because that day when she said that to me, when she expressed her love towards me, everything changed inside of my mind. It was complete turmoil in my mind that night when I got to hear this news. And then I was able to look back at all the encounters that we had with each other. And then she had also said, did you not realize that I loved you? I'm surprised that you didn't even pick up the slightest that this is how I felt about you. And she went on to say, so this is a friend, when she broke the news, she had gone on to say, because of you I changed my hair. You remember how I used to wear my hair, but I changed it because you said you like it long? And I painted my nails a different color because you said the other day that you liked French tips. And I changed the way I wear my nails, and and look at the way I dress now. It's very different. I've changed myself so much because this is how I wanted to express my love for you. But of course, I know that nothing can change now because you're going to get married tomorrow. But I just wanted to let you know. So this was what happened the night before the wedding. And 3 years later, this man comes and meets a monk and says, from that day forward, I have not been able to be at peace with the woman I got married to. There were times when I actually went to meet the other girl because I couldn't sleep from that day forward, knowing that I was no longer with the woman I wanted to be with. So I went to meet her. My wife didn't know this. My wife doesn't know this. To this date, she doesn't know this. I went to meet her. I went to be with her. My wife doesn't know this. Clearly, if I told this to her, it would break her heart. But now I feel guilty. I can't really love my wife because I don't feel about her now that way, because my heart is with my friend. The day that she gave me this news, my entire life changed, and from that day forward, I've not been living with the woman I love. Swaminathan, what must I do? So that's the story. What's your take on it? Don't you think how lovely that girl was to come and share her feelings with this man, to express the love and affection that was deep down bottled up inside of her. How much love she must have had for him, right? To share it with this man, even at the last moment. That's pure love, isn't it? I mean, come on, this is what we see in movies. Now, if you love someone, you shouldn't keep it bottled up, you should show it. Even if it's the day before the wedding and the man's going to get married to somebody else. So a monk comes and asks me, Swaminathan, what is the advice I need to give this man? I can't tell you everything I told with him. That wouldn't be nice on a call or on a sermon. But I can tell you that what I asked him to explain to the man gently was what the woman did was completely and utterly selfish. The truth is that she never loved him in the first place. She never loved him in the first place. She knew very well that the wedding was going to be taking place the following day. And she knew. Let's imagine the man had the courage, not the courage, that the man had the foolishness to change all his plans and actually now completely give up on the girl that he was going to get married to and actually get married to this friend. Can you even begin to imagine the consequences that would have had on everyone else involved? The man's parents, his mother and father. What about the wife-to-be and her parents and her friends and all her other relations? What about all the expenses that they have already made? The bookings, all of that. How is this man's parents ever going to go back into society and hold their head up high and talk about the fact that this is our son? Or how are they going to face the other man's or the girl's parents and explain this situation. Can you imagine the call that has to take place between these two families if that had been the case, where a change of plans was decided? You see, she knew all of this. This friend of his knew all of this. That's why she said, I know you're going to get married tomorrow. I know that nothing can change now. But the love I feel for you is just so strong. It's so fierce that I want to get it out, and I think you should know. This is how much I feel for you. Complete and utter selfishness. The truth is, if she really loved him, and if it was him, if it was he that she loved, I'm hoping you'll agree with me that the last thing that she should be doing is, with the wedding going to be happening the following day, the last thing she should be doing is going and expressing how she feels about him, knowing fully well that from that day forward, this man's life is going to be ruined. So what really happened was, I mean, I can kind of tell you how the girl felt. She would not agree to this, but I can tell you this is how she would have felt. I don't care what happens to you. I'm vexing, and I need you to relieve me of my vexation. To relieve myself of my vexation, I don't care what happens to you, even if it means you're destroyed, your parents are destroyed, your wife-to-be is destroyed, and her parents are destroyed, and all of your friends and family disown you from this day forward. An entire society will look down upon you from this day forward. I don't care, but I have to tell you how I feel about you. In other words, I don't care what happens to you. I need to relieve myself of my vexation. You call that love? True story. Every word of this is true. See what happens when you want something, become blind. That's why never ever think that love is a beautiful thing. It's not. Love is not a beautiful thing. Liking is not a beautiful thing. Let's not glorify our fears. Let's not glorify these words. These are curse words. These are swear words. This is what destroys the very fabric of our society. Some people interpret love as being compassion and the four abodes of metta, karuna, mudita, upeksha. I don't mean love in that sense. I mean love in the sense of I want something, I want you, I like you, and I want you. That kind of love, that is selfishness. See how much damage it can do? You know, from that day forward, this man was not able to live a happy married life with his wife. 3 years on, he had to come and talk to us. For all those 3 years, can you imagine how much he must have suffered? For this guy, he feels so guilty. He can't talk to his wife. He can't share with him how he feels. Clearly. Imagine that, telling your 3 years into your marriage, telling your wife, you know what, I made a mistake. But now he has to live with that. Why am I relating this story to you? Because what that girl did was completely destroy this man's life. I don't know if you'll agree with me, but that is the truth. She destroyed this man's life. Not physically, but worse than that, mentally. Completely destroyed this man's life. So why am I relating this story to you? Not because I want to say that, hey, there's a girl out there, watch out. I'm saying, when ignorance and attachment hijacks one's mind, there's no limit to the damage it can inflict on oneself and on everybody else. So watch out. Not from the girl, from ignorance and attachment. I doubt she wanted, if you removed ignorance and attachment from her mind, would you think that she'd do something like that? Or the best thing, the reason that this man comes 3 years after his wedding, his marriage, is because apparently this girl has somehow sent a message to this man to say, because I lost the love of my life, now I'm going to ordain, and I just want you to know that this beautiful life that I had planned for me, I lost it entirely because you didn't give up on the girl you want to get married and come with me. I don't know why people like that ordain. I mean, can you imagine that mindset? Clearly adding fuel to the fire. Let alone, she's destroyed 3 years of this man's life. Now she's making him feel guilty by going into robes. Going into robes, the most sublime thing that one could do this side of Nibbana. She's going into robes to make this man feel guilty. It's because you didn't come with me and give up her. I'm going into robes. So you had better know that you ruined my life. Oh, good Lord, you couldn't make these things up, could you? Again, as I explained this situation to our monk and said, go back and explain to him, to help him analyze the situation clearly, because the man who came to speak to our Swami Mahanse was, he was not sure what he had to do. He actually felt quite bad for the girl, for both of them. He felt quite bad for his wife, and he felt quite bad for this friend of his. He said, Swami Mahanse, look at what I've done. I don't know what to do. I can't leave my wife. I can't go to her, and then she's going to ordain now, and then she's going to lose her life, the life that she had planned. Am I going to be sinning by not giving up on my wife and going to be with her? Do I need to go and talk to her and explain to her not to give up on your beautiful life? What should I be doing? So these were the questions that were coming from him. So I explained to him, explain the situation, help him analyze, come to his wits about it, but please explain to him that this is not the girl that's doing it. Ultimately, it's just ignorance and attachment. Ignorance and attachment. This is exactly why I'm relating this story to you. Because it was just, if it was a bad girl, why would I be talking to you on this sermon about her? That's another person. It's not you. So why should I tell you about somebody else's story? The reason I'm telling you about this story is because both she and you and all of us have a common enemy. That's ignorance and attachment. If there's something we like, you can't stop wanting it. And then when you don't have it, the extent to which you will go to acquire what you desire can sometimes shock the very fabric of society. It can destroy people's lives. It can make living hell to those among you. Because the thing is this: when it happens to you, when your vexation is so deep and so fierce, you wouldn't know what you're doing. You wouldn't know what you're doing, because ignorance will have blinded you. But unfortunately, when the consequences come, when it's time to confer on you the vipakas of the karmas that you have done, At that point, unfortunately, you can't say, well, it was ignorance and attachment that did it. Unfortunately, we have to suffer. Ignorance does the deed, and we have to suffer. So if there's anything that you like and anything that you want, don't take it lightly. It has the potential to cause you great amounts of distress. It has the potential to completely destroy families and entire parts of society. It has the potential to instigate wars and complete destruction. That's how fierce and dangerous ignorance and attachment are. Behind every world war was ignorance and attachment. Behind every massacre was ignorance and attachment. Behind every murder was ignorance and attachment. Behind every burglary was ignorance and attachment. Behind every broken heart was ignorance and attachment. These are the silent killers. They hide, and they're very, very good at hiding. They'll do the damage, and they'll run away from the crime scene. So when the inspector comes, unfortunately, you don't have an alibi now, because you're there where it happened. They look around, they can't see ignorance and attachment. All they see is you. So now you are responsible for what has happened, and therefore you have to suffer the consequences. I'm telling you, stop suffering for the bad deeds, for the dirty deeds of ignorance and attachment. I'm telling you, stop suffering for the bad deeds of someone else. By someone, of course, you understand what I mean here. For as long as ignorance and attachment are those who you associate, they'll do the bad, dirty deeds, and you have to suffer the consequences. Anyone up for that? Hang around. Anyone not up for that? Let's get the hell out of here. Because they are relentless. Ignorance and attachment will be here forever. They're relentless. Every mind it infiltrates, every mind it contaminates, only destruction, grievance, agony, despair, and sorrow does it bring. So, whenever there's wanting, don't think that it's a lovely thing to have. Don't think that it's a lovely situation to be in. Wanting something is the beginning. Wanting something is the beginning of your destruction. To want something. If you want something, you are good as dead. If you don't have it, you'll be in grief. If you have it, you're in fear. And as you move from grief to fear, now you're just expending ample amounts of energy and effort, all meaningless, because all that allows you to do is jump from one type of suffering to another type of suffering. The wise will understand why this is a meaningless activity and effort to engage in. The wise will understand that wanting is the problem here. The wise will understand like or liking, which is the cause of wanting, is what we need to completely eradicate. It is rooted in ignorance. After all, why was wanting bad? Wanting was bad because it does not help you achieve what you wanted in the first place. You wanted to go from a sad face to happy face. But what happened after all? Fear I can draw a sad face there. That's a sad face. Grief, that's another sad face. So where's the happy face? We wanted this. Look at where we ended up. This or this. Where's the happy face? There's no happy face. So do you not see that the whole system is flawed? That's why we need to put a stop to this. Enough of this. So towards that cause, make all efforts, engage in as much merits as you possibly can, and use the Dhamma for your salvation. There was a few, actually, before the quarantine kicked in, I promised you I'd share with you a merit transfer, which I suggested is good to do before you take a meal. I will put it up on screen today, but next week I will explain to you the significance of it. I'll put it up on screen because I want you to just take it in, what it is about, and next week I will explain to you what the significance of it and why it is a good thing to be doing. But in the meantime, if you can take note of it, we'll get it shared out through our usual social media channels, so you don't have to write it down as such. But if you can just take a mental note of it, that'll be quite handy. Okay, so just take a mental note of what you're seeing on screen right now, and next week I will explain to you the significance of it and why it's a good thing to be doing before you take your meals. I would encourage you to start doing it straight away, so you can start doing it as of today. So whether that's all 3 meals or you only have the time to do it 1 meal a day, do it as best you can. If you can do it before every meal you take, that's always a good thing to do. So I'll read it out to you just in case it's not clear. To the great kings of old, who built the great lakes and dams, rivers and canals, to both man and beast, who cultivated the lands, sowed the seeds and reaped the crops, to those who processed the yield into food, to those who cooked and served me this meal, and everyone in between who supported, I transfer all of the merits I have acquired throughout samsara. May they all rejoice in these merits. You'll be familiar with the next part of this. May through the power of these merits, if any of them have been born in the woeful plains, they redeem themselves and be born in the blissful plains, and may through the power of these merits they abstain from the unmeritorious deeds, fulfill the meritorious deeds, fulfill the noble eightfold path, and may they all attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. So this is something we do at the monastery every day before we take our meals, and I would encourage you all to start doing it. The benefits of doing this I will explain in detail in the next sermon, but for those of you who wouldn't want to wait till then, which I'm hoping is all of you, you can start doing it straight away. So this video is of course going to be available after the sermon on YouTube, so you can either take it down later on, or you can make a note of it now, or after the sermon, within the day we will share this out on our social media channels, on Skype, and I'll also try to put a link into the sermon in the description of the YouTube sermon, so it's accessible to you. Start doing it straight away, and you will begin to experience the results of this if you do it wholeheartedly, as in you don't do it just for the sake of it, but you do it wholeheartedly. Then you will begin to experience the results of this soon enough. But I'll explain to you why we are suggesting you do this at the next sermon. And this is all part of our gratitude to all those who have helped and supported us. Okay, so it's not just they who we are transferring merits who will benefit from this, but those of us who are actually transferring the merits. There are great benefits to be gained. We'll talk about that more next week. Okay, so on that note, we'll conclude the sermon by transferring merits. Please do think about what we talked about today. That particular story was, again, as I say, for you to reflect on the things that ignorance and attachment are able to do. Today you will say, Swaminathan, I'd never do something like that. Do you think 3 years ago, if we asked that girl, would you ever do something like that, you think she'd say, yes, I would? No, of course not. If you ask someone who kills his mother a week before the event, would you ever kill your mother? He's going to say no. See, after the fact, we can all look back and say, or before it happens, we can all say, no, I'm never going to do that. I'm not like that. I'd never do that. What are you thinking? What do you think about me? What do you think I'm like? I'd never do something like that. But then when ignorance and attachment raise their ugly heads, then there's no saying how much damage it can inflict. So best we not take chances. Work on cleansing your mind of the defilements as best you can, and use the sermons for that purpose. But also remember what I mentioned a little while ago. This is only half of, or even not even half, this is probably a quarter of what you need to be doing. Or I would even say a fifth. 20% of your practice is about listening to the Dhamma. 80%, a vast majority, 80% is about your practice. So if you're not doing the things that we're asking you to do, I would not be surprised if you don't reap results. And I'm telling you, don't you be surprised either. So don't you be surprised that you're not able to follow the path, you're not seeing the changes that you're expecting to see. Don't you be surprised that you're not experiencing an internal transformation if you're not doing the things that we're asking you to do. If all you're doing is just listening to the sermons, that'll do a small part of it, but the large majority of it is with your practice. And that practice you need to be doing alone, not with me or anybody. That has to be done you and yourself alone. So that's an important message. This is why I emphasize that in this moment. Okay? So let us transfer the merits then, and we will bring the sermon to a close. First and foremost, let us all remind ourselves of how extremely fortunate we are to be in receipt of the Buddha's teaching. Let us take a moment to transfer merits to the Bhikkhu, Bhikkhunis, Upasaka, Upasikas who since time immemorial protected and preserved the teaching of the Buddha and passed it down through the generations through the noble lineage as well as in the form of the Tripitaka, which is today available to us to study, understand and comprehend and help us to achieve our liberation. May they all rejoice in the merits that we have all acquired today. Let us also take a moment to transfer merits to all the monks who are resident at this monastery, including Guru Swami Nuhanse, as well as all of the other monks and the Anagarikas, as well as all the Anagarikas who are also attached to the monastery. May they all rejoice in the merits that we have all acquired today, as well as all the devotees who make great efforts to sustain the monks and the Anagarikas at the monastery through their generosity. May they all rejoice in the merits that we have all acquired today. Let us also take a moment to transfer merits to the members of the Dharmayai Trust, those who are involved in the running of the monastery, as well as all the other activities that happen alongside to benefit everyone and all concerned. May they all rejoice in the merits that we have all acquired today. Let us also take a moment to transfer merits to all the members of the Mahasangha, wherever they may be resident throughout this world, including the monks and nuns who are resident in your local temples and nunneries. Let us not forget for a moment that it is they who have always been by your side through thick and thin, come rain or shine, to support you, to guide you, to assist you in the difficult times of your life. May they all rejoice in the merits that we have all acquired today. Let us also take a moment to transfer merits to our parents, teachers, brothers, sisters, relations, friends, and those who have always been by our sides to help us, support us, guide us, and assist us in their capacity. May they all rejoice in the merits that we have all acquired today. And may through the power of these merits, if any of them have today been born in woeful states, be able to redeem themselves and be born in the blissful plane. And may through the power of these merits, they abstain from the unmeritorious deeds, fulfill the meritorious deeds, fulfill the noble eightfold path, and may they all attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Let us also take a moment to transfer merits to the Devas, Brahmas, spirits, demons, and those who have predeceased us, our ancestors. May they all rejoice in the merits that we have all acquired today. These are those who have helped us, supported us, and assisted us in this infinitely long journey in samsara. May they rejoice in the merits that we have acquired, and may through the power of these merits, if any of them have been born in woeful states, redeem themselves and be born in the blissful plane, and may through the power of these merits they abstain from the unmeritorious deeds, fulfill the meritorious deeds, fulfill the noble eightfold path, and may they all attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Let us also take a moment to transfer merits to all those who have been affected by the long war that ensued in Sri Lanka, both friend and foe, men, women, and children who lost their lives and are today, and may today have been born in woeful states. There will be among them those who sacrificed their lives on behalf of ours. So may they all rejoice in merits that we have all acquired today. Let us also take a moment to transfer merits to those who have been impacted by the ongoing pandemic, as well as those who are tirelessly committing themselves to helping those who have been affected. May they all rejoice in the merits that we have all acquired today. Let us also take a moment to transfer merits to all those men, women who are involved and have dedicated themselves to leading our nation, to protecting our nation, and to safeguarding it, to developing our nation, and to do whatever it is in their capability to protect us and safeguard us, so that we are today able to practice the Dhamma in peace and harmony without having to worry about such duties and responsibilities and obligations. May they all rejoice in the merits that we have all acquired today. May through the power of these merits, if any of them have been born in woeful states, be able to redeem themselves and be born in the blissful plane, and may through the power of these merits they abstain from the unmeritorious deeds, fulfill the meritorious deeds, fulfill the noble eightfold path, and may they all attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Let us also take a moment to transfer merits to all those who have made this event a success, made it possible, as well as those who take great efforts to transliterating these sermons and making it available for mass consumption, and available to those who are unable to listen to these sermons, be it live or the recorded sermons. May they all rejoice in the merits that we have all acquired today, particularly those who might have invited you to listen to these sermons, or shared with you a link perhaps, or made whatever other facilities available to you, such that today you are able to listen to the Dhamma and initiate a transformational change within your lives. May they all rejoice in the merits that we have all acquired today. It is they who have always been by our sides to guide us, support us, and assist us. These are the Satpurushas in our lives. May they all rejoice in the merits that we have all acquired today, and may through the power of these merits they abstain from the unmeritorious deeds, fulfill the meritorious deeds, fulfill the noble eightfold path, and may they all attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And finally, may through the power of all the merits that we have all acquired today, we be able to witness the advent of many hundreds of thousands of Arahatun Vahanses and Arahat Mehenin Vahanses in our lives itself, and in the era of the Gautama Supreme Buddha itself. And may through the power of these merits, you and I and everyone who has contributed to making this event a success, however small or large it might have been, may they all rejoice in these merits, and may they all become one of those Arahatun Vahanses and Arahat Mehenin Vahanses in this life itself and in the era of the Gautama Supreme Buddha itself. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Members of the Mahasangha will now transfer their blessings to you. Raga ginnen idetva, Dvesha ginnen idetva, Moha ginnen idetva, Nibbana parama sukhayen sukhita taravetva. Nibbana parama sukhayen sukhita taravetva. Mamada siyalu loka siyalu satvayo Nibbana parama sukhayen Sukhitatara vetva Nibbana parama sukhayen Sukhitatara vetva Nibbana parama sukhayen Sukhitatara vetva Raga gini niveva Dvesha gini niveva Moha gini niveva Nivan sapa labeva Nivan sapa labeva Nivan sapa labeva තුනුරුවන්ගේ සුවිසි අනන්ත මහා ගුණ බෙලෙන් සීල ලෝක සීල සත්වයෝම නිබ්බාන පරම සුඛයෙන් සුඛිතතර වෙත්වා. May I and all beings in all worlds be freed from the fires of desire. May I and all beings in all worlds be freed from the fires of aversion. May I and all beings in all worlds be freed from the fires of delusion. May I and all beings in all worlds attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. May the Noble Triple Gem be with you all forever. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. We will now conclude the sermon. May the Noble Triple Gem be with you all.